prayer.
Dear kind Heavenly Father, we're so grateful for this day and for the opportunity that we have to be here in seminar. Father, we ask you that your Spirit may be with us, and please bless the presenters that they may do well. And Father, please bless the missionaries as well, that they may find us that are searching for the truth. And we're so grateful for thy Son and for the sacrifice that he made for each and every one of us, and for our leaders and for our prophet. Please bless them. And Father, we ask you that we may be able to always follow our Savior's example, and we're so grateful for all that we have, and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
All right. All dressed up. So look through these announcements real quickly. IT's having a closing social on the 17th at 5:30. Probably not coming out with that. AC, we're having a closing social Wednesday at 5 in front of the Clyde. Hot dogs, Byron, sounds good again. So look forward to that. We're also looking at a sports night, probably Tuesday around 5. Faculty's invited. There's going to be coming out with more details. That if you make it, come. It was great last time. Service going on right now. There is the can food drive. 5 cans get to 1 point, 10 cans get to 1 point, 1 million cans get to 1 point. You can only get 1 point for the can food drive. So, RMC was a great experience. It's very cold. Dudes did not race, but we had a great time. Made some great memories. Look forward to next year. If you want to get involved in the Steel British Company, you can write papers. Then for RMC payment, if you haven't paid yet, make sure you do that. I think David Blake's going to be sending out an email pretty soon for travel expenses. There's a job opportunity, BYU Civil Engineering intern. If you're on campus, they're looking for, they really want freshmen or sophomores who can probably be here a long time. This is a good experience. I believe it's 15 hours during the semester, full-time, spring, summer. So if you're looking for something to do and you want to have civil engineering intern experience, you can get it here at BYU. And then Navy polos, we still have them. Next semester we're looking at getting some white polos. This is the sizes we have left. And there will be women's sizes above the new polos, so don't worry. All right, so really fast, Sandy and I are going to come up. So we want to just really quickly tell you guys that Kinley Horn, Q, city engineering is not the only options that you have. There are a lot of things that you can do for civil engineering. So we're just going to run through that really quick.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys have seen the John Oliver sketch on infrastructure, but we're going to start with the least sexy, is standards. So you can go do things like ASTM, you can establish like building code standards, you can be an inspector, and those things can make people safe. So we just want to talk about like other things you can do.
You can also get your PhD and teach, you can do research, the professors travel around the world, they do really awesome stuff. You do forensic civil engineering. There's all sorts of cool stuff, more on the academia side of things that you can do.
And then civil engineering can be a great launching pad for a lot of different things. And so if you like construction, construction is a great industry to go into, and they love civil engineering majors. You can also use your civil engineering to go into different things like historic preservation, landscape management, architecture. You can go into city planning like Leslie Knope, or you can work for the government. So there's lots of cool things you can do, like the launching pad.
Then there's oil and gas and nuclear, pay very well, and they do hire civil engineers. ExxonMobil comes to BYU, Chevron, Valero, all these companies. And it's, if you get in there, I think that's where the highest paid civil engineering grad and the last few years has gone, was one of those big oil and gas companies. So, you know, if you want to sell your soul to that, that's and then way out there, you can get off. Sammy was telling me there's a test, a patent law test.
Yeah, so if you take the patent law exam, but you don't go to law school and just take the exam, you can work part-time as, I can't remember, like a consultant or a help to the law firm, and you can get like 80, I think the salary they said was like 80 grand just part-time. So that's an option as well.
And then there's all sorts of other things that you can do as on this list. But in the end, you know, we all want to get paid, right?
Yeah, so here's a list of like average salaries for different things. We just looked up really quick. You can go research more, but we wanted to really just talk about this briefly. As before you guys go into the summer, you can start thinking about, okay, where do I want to go with civil engineering? And also at the end of the semester, there's always that time where it's like finals, and you're like, oh, do I really want to stick with civil engineering? Like, I don't know if I like this. I was there for one spring semester, and so just know that there's so many things you can do with your civil engineering degree. Even if you don't want to end up doing design, it's a great launching pad. I just wanted to kind of like let you guys know that there's lots of opportunities.
Exactly. So be thinking over the summer. I believe that's it. If you want more, the department has LinkedIn connections so that you can reach out to civil engineers who are working in design, who are working in other things. So make sure to use those resources. And we'll turn the time over to Dr. Bora, who's got a few things to say, and then start our presentation.
Okay, just very quickly, today I think most of you know we're going to do presentations from our capstone groups. Each of you will be required to take a capstone course before you leave the department. There's a couple of options for that. One is just our capstone course where we have projects that will be presented today. The Dominican Republic, study abroad, offers capstone credit also, and there are one or two other options that are being considered. So we wanted today to just present to each of you the results of some of the projects that the students accomplished this year. This is going to be really condensed, very quick, just short presentations about their projects. We had 12 teams this year that worked on projects. They're each going to spend just 3 minutes, so they're going to try to encapsulate all the work that they've done over 2 semesters into 3 minutes. So it's a tough thing to do, but it really helps them, I think, kind of distill the essence of what they've done in their projects. We hope that this gives you an idea and some anticipation, some excitement maybe for what might come in the future for you, for your projects. We invite you all to go over right after seminar to the Step Down Lounge, where each of the teams will be doing poster presentations of their project. You can ask them more in detail about each of their projects there. There will be some light refreshments there for you also. After you see those things, we've invited local engineers from the Central Utah branch of ASCE to come and also to view those presentations and to see the students and ask them questions also. So the order is a little bit covered up there right now. Number 6 is first. So if you teams could each be ready to very quickly come and make your presentations. They've been downloaded onto the computer already. I'm going to time you. With 30 seconds left, I'll raise my hand and wave it a little bit. When 3 minutes comes, you're done. Right? We're not going to go over. You've got to get off the stage after the 3 minutes is up. So let's proceed. 6.
Okay, so we worked with Hewitt, and the people we worked with actually are from Nebraska. But the project we worked on is in Irving, Texas, which is right outside of Dallas. And it was a temporary slope repair for highway expansion. So while Hewitt was widening, so they were working on a road, and so they wanted to create new lanes to divert the traffic while they could work on the road. So they cut into a slope and it slumped or failed. And so here we have a picture. It's kind of hard to see. It's a panoramic view of the slope that failed, and then the profile with the soil, what it looks like before solution.
All right. So within our analysis of the problem, we used AutoCAD, MathCAD, the FHWA design manual, and QTexas, which is a slope stability analysis program. Our analysis within QTexas led us to confirm the problem of what was happening. It shows that our slope failed approximately midway down the slope, and it has a factor of safety of approximately 0.8, meaning that it is failing. And our solution has a factor of safety of 1.3, so we met our target factor of safety.
We looked at lots of different possible solutions, terracing, a lot of them, but we chose the most boring of them all, but the most typically used and most effective. A shotcrete face covering with soil nails. I spent about 10 hours, 15 pages of handwritten notes, figuring that it's 10 inches thick shotcrete, and did the cost analysis.
So after our calculations, our soil nails there are 20 feet long, and they were spaced 5 feet down from vertical, 4 feet from horizontal, with 952 nails total within the entire area of the project. Our cost came to be $167,000, which includes construction and installation, and then the duration is going to be 4 weeks for the completion of the project. Thank you for your time.
We worked with Bluffdale City engineers on a low impact development or LID manual for the city of Bluffdale. So low impact development is a stormwater management technique that is basically trying to maintain what was there before construction, after construction or development. This is something that's coming down the pipes from EPA and Utah DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality. And it's going to be part of the stormwater permit for Bluffdale City in 2019. So the specifics is that any site that is 1 acre or larger, or a single development that is multiple sites of 1 acre or larger, has to be able to keep the 90th percentile storm from entering the stormwater system and entering like the sewage.
So there are various different methods that you can use to accomplish this, and so we analyzed a lot of different ones. We just have one example right here, which is, well, we have several pictures of different examples that you can use, like swales and biotech, storm tech technology, which APS, they presented to us a little while ago, and they do those for rainfall capture using rain barrels. And so, and all of these, the goal is to evapotranspirate, or infiltrate, or capture and reuse, and to treat the rainfall rather than just collecting it and sending it off-site in the storm drain. And so here, one example is bioretention basins. So in bioretention basins, you dig a shallow depression where, depending on the kind of soil that you have and soil characteristics, you'll have to amend the soil so that with engineered soils that are going to be more permeable and encourage plant growth, and then you'll plant native plants in there, so we'll grade everything so that the flow will be directed to environmental basically. And that will help collect and store the water. So we created a manual of all these different LID, and like here's an example of one of the entries in the manual, which is the bioswale, which tells the characteristics of it.
In an effort to make the manual more usable, we created a flow chart, a decision tree that takes and breaks down through different criteria to help you get to the most useful LID for a particular project.
Hi, good morning everyone. My name is Derek Lenford, this is Trenton Parks, and this is Robert Thompson, and we are DTR Engineering. We were assigned, we were assigned for our capstone to do pavement management research. Our sponsors were JUB Engineers. They basically asked us to look at local pavement practices and look at the stresses on streets and what kind of treatments they use on them and how long the lifespan kind of creates with that. And they wanted us to convert that into a PCI range, which is just a range from 100 to 0, 100 being the best, 0 being the worst. Here's a couple streets here in Provo that you've probably seen, or maybe not, but 700 is a higher PCI, lower PCI is 10 to 4.
So in order to gather the information, we created a survey that we sent out to street superintendents throughout Utah County. This survey, as you can see, this is an example of that. We gave them a list of types of treatments and had them mark which types of distresses they are used to treat, how much the average treatment costs, the lifespan of that treatment, and how it improves the PCI over time. And this is a graph, a pavement performance curve we were able to make from that data we compiled. As you can see, the initial natural aging curve, if you follow that blue dotted line, if there's no treatment done to the road, that's how it will deteriorate over time. Best practice is to do low-cost initial preventative treatments, and then if there's no treatments done and then the road starts to deteriorate, you have to do rehabilitation, which will improve the life of the road, but it will deteriorate quicker over time.
In addition to the curve that Robert just talked about, we're also able to generate these two tables. Table 1 addresses the average cost and the average lifetime of each treatment that's used by the local governments in Utah Valley. And the second table addresses the appropriate PCI range to apply those treatments, and also the approximate increase that the treatment has in the PCI per road. And this table shows the different treatment options that are used by local governments here in Utah Valley, Utah County, and also the types of distresses that each of those treatments fix. So in conclusion, we were able to get some valuable data to JUB about the different treatment options that are used here locally, and also the increase in PCI that each of those treatments has. And if this project were to continue, we'd recommend that additional data be gathered on the subgrade of soil beneath the roads in Utah County. So that way correlation can be found between the deterioration rate and the subgrade of the soil. Thank you.
So we're CAM Engineering. My name's Austin. This is Megan. And so our task for our capstone project was to put together a development plan for this site down in the Spanish Fork. It's called the Arrowhead Center. So here there's 4 parcels, and we came up with a plan to place it.
So on the left-hand side is a Google Maps, and then on top of that layer is the different parcels and what we chose to put there. The green space, parcel 1 would be a park or recreational space. It lies right along the Spanish Fork River, and it would be a great place for residential people to hang out and do things. The orange represents commercial space. On parcel 3, we wanted to place a grocery store. And on parcels 2, we wanted to do office space for small businesses. And the blue represents residential space, which would be medium-sized housing development that could use commercial space in parcels 3 and 2, and then the green space in parcel 1. On the right-hand side, we were then tasked of evaluating our plan, both economically, socially, environmental factors that play into that, as well as construction feasibility. And we generated this table. Any of you who have taken 201 or will take 201, a very similar process of a weighted evaluation scheme to evaluate this plan compared to a plan provided by our sponsor, Fritzy Realty, and we compare those directly.
Okay. So this weighting plan, you can see, through our research, we were able to create specific weights for each category, depending on their importance. And with each row, we were able to compare the Fritzy Realty plan and the CAM engineering plan. And in conclusion, we have found that the CAM plan, which includes green space, office space, grocery, and residential, would be the most well-rounded plan to fit our 3 parameters: people, planet, and profit. So I would like to thank you for listening to our presentation.
Hello, my name is Stuart Withers. This is Kirk Cower, and this is Yashi Kwong. We are Team Arrow. We're the second group to do the overall Arrowhead project. So, as already been explained, there are certain site conditions. One of the parcels had an existing industrial building, and 3 other parcels were empty, and we were supposed to come up with a preliminary site plan that could be proposed to Spanish Fork City for approval. There are certain constraints that we had in our design, a certain methodology, and one is we wanted to make sure that there's enough demand for the land use that we're planning for. We want to provide economic benefit to the area and to the sponsor Fritzy Realty, and then also we wanted to meet the city preferences, the city's general plan. So best as we could, we wanted to balance all those for an optimum design. We looked over a couple designs from the 201 class from last semester, the sustainability design class, and took some of those best ideas and came up with our plan. One thing that is very big right now in Utah County is the projected population growth. Utah County and Spanish Fork have both experienced a lot of growth over the last 100 years, and it is projected to continue to grow. And so we wanted to come up with a site plan that would be able to meet those needs.
So for our design, as you can see in the CAD drawing, we determined that parcel A and B, office space and mixed-use commercial space would be the best use for parcel A and B, and low to medium density residential would be the best use for parcel C and D. We also designed a commercial strip along the edge of parcel C, so we can set the residential further back from the busy Arrowhead Trial Road. And here is a 3D model we built for our site plan.
Alright, and then this is just the original site plan that was presented by Fritzy Realty. It's just a little bit different with residential again on the bottom ones, and then 3 plexes, so medium-ish density on the other ones. And so we just found some numbers in the general area for Spanish Fork to come up with some revenue and cost analysis. And we came off with a payoff date of 11 years, and then a return on investment, an annual return on investment of 9%. So depending on who you talk to, that can be good or bad, but that's a presentation. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Gabrielle Jones. This is Mitchell Hadfield and Shannon Carroll. And our project focused on transportation and urban planning, design, data review, and assessment at the Arrowhead Center in Spanish Fork, Utah. So our main objective was to create a formal traffic impact study to address the potential traffic impacts of the proposed land development at the Arrowhead Center. So to start, we collected traffic counts at 5 surrounding intersections at the project location from weekday peak hours from 7 to 9 a.m. and 4 to 6 p.m. to satisfy Spanish Fork City requirements. And then we input that data into Synchro 9 traffic modeling software to model existing and future traffic conditions for 2018, 2022, and 2027. And with those results, we then created a formal traffic impact study that includes our results from the modeling software, as well as mitigation measures that we recommend to increase the level of service for any roadway surrounding the property, to increase the level of service from below a C to a C or higher.
So if anyone's taken 361, you're familiar with this 4-step plan. At least you know the words, but you probably don't know how to implement it. But we actually got a chance to learn how to actually do it in real life. So we used the IT trip generation manual and determined that the Fritzie subdivision would create 145 peak hour trips. And we factored that into our design and then ran the simulation like Gabrielle said with Synchro.
Let's see if we can possibly get this to work here. All right, so this is an example of a level of service C intersection with our projected data. You can see there's not too much of a lag time for the cars going through. They're moving through pretty smoothly. This one, you can see there's a definite problem on the east side of the intersection. The cars are backing up. So here we recommended to increase the green time that those cars get, as well as add another right turn lane, because most of the movements are going to the right. Here we have another intersection that's not quite at the level of service it needs to be. If we just signalize this intersection, that takes care of those cars that are waiting for a long time on the north. Here we have some more problems with level of service. The cars are waiting too long at stop signs on those small intersections. So if we just disallow left and true turn movements, those level of service improve to a level of service C or above. This is just a summary of what our level of service was and the different recommendations we had. For the 2 main intersections that were level of service all the way through, they weren't directly next to the project site. So with those, it might not even need to be a part of the problem with the site with any future development.
All right, so we're the environmental and water resource team for the Arrowhead project. I'm Braxton, this is Daniel, this is Kyle. So our scope of work, we looked at the environmental impact on the property after it was developed. We also looked at water resource needs, namely sanitary sewer, stormwater drainage, and culinary water.
So among the obvious concerns that come with environmental aspects of building a project, like the wetlands and floodplains, we reviewed the site and found that some endangered species could possibly also exist on this site, and the endangered fish and June sucker and the threatened flowers, the Danish tress flower.
So moving into water resources, we looked at the sanitary sewer, and the biggest problem that we had was right along here, there's a river, which can be a pain in the butt to get sewers across. So what we ended up doing is we split parcels 1 and 2, and they connected into this neighborhood that's just west of the property. And then 3 and 4, this sand and gravel pit is owned by WDOB Clyde, and they're planning on turning that into a development. So we plan on connecting 3 and 4 and working with them and connecting into their sewer system.
We also performed storm drain analysis using some information that we stole from the hydrology class. LD and I consulted engineering, performed a basic analysis. We expanded upon that. We determined that some detention will be necessary to retain some storm runoff, namely parcels 1 and 4. This also depends on how much you can let into the city system. That depends on city requirements. Those will be also be checked. However, these detention basins that we used could double as public parks, playgrounds, just low-lying areas that can hold extra storm runoff. It's not that would serve a dual purpose. The last water resource we covered is culinary water. These are plans based off the Fritzie Realty proposal. It's estimated that we have 192,000 gallons per day. The current resources provided by Spanish Fork City should be sufficient to meet these demands, so we should be good in regards to culinary water. Thank you very much.
So we were also working on the Arrowhead project. We were in charge of the structural and geotechnical aspects of this project. For the structural aspects, we were tasked with analyzing the existing building. And to do that, we got some measurements and we looked at the structure. For the open web truss roof, we found a span table, and from that, and calculating the loads that would be on that, those trusses, we were able to determine that these open web roof trusses were adequate.
We also looked at an open structure portion of the building. We analyzed those Z-purlins on the roof using the program RESA. Using the loads we got and those members, we found that roof was also adequate. There are a few portions of the building that need closer looking at. However, some of these columns have been damaged and need to be looked at by licensed engineers. And then the older portion of the building is mostly wood framed, and a lot of these members are split and have potential water damage or other things that also need to be more closely inspected to determine the structural adequacy of that structure. But we also found most of the building is, exterior of the building is masonry, which we determined to be reinforced based on the type of brick. And, unreinforced. We found it to be unreinforced based on the type of bricks and some of the visual evidence we found. And so that would need to be reinforced in order to bring that up to seismic code, which could be quite costly.
So we also looked at the floodplain concern more from a structural aspect, as the other groups looked at it as well. So on parcel 1 in particular, there's some potential issues there. So the geotechnical report that we were provided with implements some suggestions for drainage for those things, some perforating pipes underneath the plot of land that should solve the problem. We had also looked at our proposed land use, mainly at Fritzie Realty's proposal, and basically determined that from the geotechnical standpoint, the plots are sufficient to hold those structures. And basically, in conclusion, we looked at a lot of damaged members and different areas of the building that probably ought to be looked at by a licensed structural engineer, and that's our project.
Okay, so we worked with American Tubular Products. They're located just a little north of the Vineyard. And basically the scope of our project was to do comparison testing through physical lab tests, principles of mechanics and materials, those calculations that you use in 203, and finite element modeling, and determine if a triangle HSS section is a viable substitute for traditional circle, rectangle, or square. And we did multiple lab testings to fulfill this scope.
As Chris talked about, we used a lot of the principles from 203, the mechanics of materials, in order to do this analysis. One of the things that we needed to design were the tensile test coupons
that we would use to determine if the molding of the steel into the tubular sections produced had any effect on the strength of the steel. The 3 tests that we performed were in the lab were pin bending, fixed bending, and buckling. This is an example of our fixed bending on the Baldwin machine. We had to design all the fixtures, again using the mechanics and materials textbook and equations. And we were able to get about 7 or 8 inches of deflection before our welds failed. And after we had all these results, we then took these and we compared them to our finite element analysis.
So none of us had much experience with finite element analysis. So Dr. Lee helped a little bit with that part. He built pretty much the whole model, and we kind of like determined like from the data that we received from it if it was similar to what we found from the physical testing. So these are some of the pictures. The darker the color, the way you kind of see the scale, the more red is where the most stress is. So it provides it kind of shows like where the most stress is and how it's going to fail. And the finite element analysis actually turned out to be very accurate to our physical testing. The red X is the average from the overall average. And you can see they're all pretty close to their average, both the finite element analysis and the physical testing results. And so from these results that we got, we determined that the triangle, you can see it's the red one and the blue one. They both were right there in the mix with all of the other shapes. So we determined that it is a viable replacement for all of the other shapes just because it is able to support similar loads and have similar deflection. That was our project.
Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Olivia, this is Riley, and this is McLean. And we did a materials testing database and web app development for Jones and DeMille Engineering. They are in Richfield, Utah, if anyone has any idea where that is. It's a little town 2 hours south of here. And part of what they do is they test materials, and they do a couple of them a day. And so over the course of a year, they're running hundreds and hundreds of tests. So that's a lot to keep track of. So they wanted us to find a better way to keep track of their testing. So we designed a database in Excel to put all these test results into, and then basically convert that to a map so that they can see on a map of Utah where all their testing was done, and that if they ever need to go back and find a specific test that was done, it's a lot easier for them to go find. And then we actually had extra time, so a bonus part of our project was to design spreadsheets for the material testing results for the remote locations. So this is what the spreadsheet looks like. We have lat and long coordinates for the soil materials and project number, project name. We just inputted all of that into Excel, and that was the bulk of our project because there was nearly 1,000 tests for us to get all that information about.
As part of the bonus, we built these spreadsheets for about 7 different tests that happened in the Richfield lab. They do have quite the state-of-the-art lab, and so it did require. So there was about 7 different tests, including Proctor's and grades. They took a while to build, but they actually worked out pretty well. It could save the company up to a couple $1,000s a year.
Okay, so this last slide shows the actual database that we compiled. On the left there, you can see that you can make inquiries, so you can put a date range, or you can put like a filter by gradation, Proctor, stuff like that, and a project number. That way, the lab manager can go in and he can select which test he wants to pull up, and then send that result to whoever you need to send it to. So that's our project. Thanks.
Okay, our project was to look at the national building code for the country of Nepal, specifically their seismic building code, and to make recommendations for changes and updates. Our sponsor was Vishnu Adhikari, who you might recognize from the film Meet the Mormons that came out a few years ago.
So back in 2015, the nation of Nepal had a 7.8 magnitude earthquake. It killed nearly 9,000 people and injured 22,000. And it damaged and destroyed over 20,000 buildings in the country and cost them an estimated $10 billion in damage, which is 50% of their gross domestic product.
So the problem we were asked to look into, the Nepal National Building Code was written in 1994 and has not been updated since. And along with that, the code has not been effectively enforced by the cities and by the government.
So up here, there's a few of our recommendations. We have many more than this, but we're just going to talk about a couple. One of them was to change the recurrence interval of the design earthquake from 475 years to 2,500 years. And if you guys remember how risk works out, that means in a 50-year period, that takes your risk from a 1 in 10 chance of having that earthquake occur to a 1 in 50 chance of having that earthquake occur.
And then, of the equations in the Nepal National Building Code, one of the equations is seismic-based shear. While that has remained the same, the coefficients used for it the methods used to find that coefficient have changed. The seismic coefficient method and the modal response spectrum method. So we recommended that they update that to get it more applicable to what is now being used.
And their code, when it was first written, was a young building code, so it referenced a lot of other codes in the Indian Standard Code and then other international codes. So we also recommend that they update to not just include the section number, but also the section title, because those codes have been updated and they will continue to be updated. So they need to be able to find them in future versions.
So our final recommendation is that professional licensed engineers, specifically those who are in Nepal or have experience working in countries like Nepal, can evaluate our recommendations and decide if those would be appropriate for Nepal, those with more qualifications than us. And it would also be important to train building officials for proper code enforcement and to increase the awareness of the necessity for quick, safe construction. Thanks.
Hi everybody. So our project was a couple of concrete water storage tanks up in a campground in Shawnee and Ben Lomond near Liberty, Utah. These are 25,000 gallon tanks. They're about 50 years old, and our main assignment was to determine whether we should refurbish or replace these tanks. Through the course of our project, we were able to go visit these tanks on 2 different occasions, and both of those were very helpful in helping us come up with a final recommendation. We noticed several things that were somewhat alarming about the tanks. They're obviously very old and worn. There was exposed rebar, exposed aggregate, cracking, and efflorescence, which is a sign of water leaking through the concrete, the cracks in the concrete.
This just shows a very basic hydraulic model, because there was a problem from the 2 spring sources flowing into the raw water tank where only one flow was able to make it into the tank. Therefore, we proposed that the 2 spring sources be separated into 2 separate lines and fed directly into the raw water tank. And using EPA net, we determined that this is a very feasible proposition. Also, to test the structural integrity of the water tanks, we ran what is known as the hammer and chain test to check for delamination in the raw water tank and the treated water tank. We wanted to run more extensive tests, and the tests are here at BYU, but it costs hundreds of dollars, so BYU wisely chose not to give that equipment to us.
So for possible solutions to the structural issues, we considered a few options. One was refurbishment. There's a compound called Zypex that is a waterproof coating that you can use on tanks to fill in small micro cracking and even larger cracks. Another possible solution would be to replace the tanks with fiberglass tanks. One problem with the concrete tanks is that they didn't have any structural plans, so it was hard to know exactly how strong they were. So if we were to replace the tanks, we would have plans for them for the future.
We decided to recommend use of the Zypex, mainly based on the fact that we couldn't find any justification to replace the concrete water tanks and the fact that Zypex is significantly less costly.
Overall, part of our recommendation is also to do some further testing. One of the tests we recommend is doing a cover meter test. This is a test that helps you locate where rebar is located in concrete, and it can even tell you the size. This would be very useful in evaluating how strong the tanks are. There's a list of other tests that we would also recommend that could be useful. But in the end, we recommend that replacement not be done until testing is proven that they need to be replaced. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm Brad Clausen. I'm presenting for all 4 of the Dominican Republic Study Abroad Capstone projects in 3 minutes. So, the Dominican Republic, just like every other country, has to deal with natural disasters, providing enough water for their crops, providing electricity for the people, getting potable water, and all of this while trying to not waste fresh water. So our project's focused on the Yaqui del Sur basin, where most of the crop growing occurs. So Team 1 was tasked with combining the streamflow prediction tool from BYU with the WMO's flash flow guidance system to better predict stream flows based on weather forecasts. And then Team 2 took that data and then applied it to reservoir levels, so they predicted how much water the reservoirs would have. And then Team 3 created an app that took the existing crops that are growing and calculated how much water they would need. And then Team 4 took all 3 apps and applied it to diverting water from the irrigation companies. So these projects can be implemented worldwide. This is where the streamflow prediction tool is used across the world. So it's pretty amazing. So Team 1, to kind of go in more detail, so Ken Lippold, Jeff Derricott, Jason Beeson, Corey Pearson, and myself, we took the existing flash flood guidance tool and combined it. So this tool calculates flooding based on soil moisture, and then the flash flood guidance tool calculates it based on predicted precipitation. So combining it looks like this, looks like a big mess, but if you zoom in, you can actually get a better idea of flood probability. So that's very useful for the local water agency to know how best to prepare, what to expect, and what they can do with that. And then with that, Kaylin Naylor, Kate Corbett, and Alyssa took our data and applied it to reservoir levels. So they made another app where you can click on a reservoir and see reservoir levels, predicted reservoir levels over time, and basically you can update it anywhere and anyone can do it that works there. And then with that, Ali, Travis, Jacob, and Skylar basically looked at what's actually grown in Dominican Republic, and they made an app that any farmer can use with a phone and update what their field uses, and then based on that data in the different hydrologic equations, they can calculate how much water that crop needs. And so, and lastly, the Brad Wells, and Hannah Rasmussen, and Curtis Ray took all the data from the previous 3 apps and made an app that lets entity, the local water agency, know how much water to divert and where and when.
And so their app basically tells the agency and the irrigation managers what they have available and how best to allocate it based on priority. And basically we did a lot of work, we had a lot of fun, and here's some of the fun. So if you're considering a study abroad, the New England Public Capstone is an excellent choice. So thank you.
Very quickly, that's just a little taste of some of the projects that you can be involved in. We hope you're looking forward to that. It's really fun. Learn a lot of good things. We want to thank our sponsors that have participated with us. We're grateful for the projects we've had. And we also need to thank Dr. Wayne Lee for working with us. Join us over in the step down.